From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We hope that you and yours are sheltering in place in a comfortable and secure environment, and we look forward to greeting you at our yacht club just as soon as this pandemic is over. Our speaker today remembers being a 6-year-old, envious of the other kids in his summer neighborhood, and finally persuading his dad to buy him an 8-foot Optimist. His dad leashed it to the end of the dock and allowed the young Gustav to sail around in relative security. But Gustav is never far from the desire for speed, and he graduated soon enough to an F-18 catamaran, considerably faster than an Optimist, and went on to earn a master's in mechanical engineering from the Royal Institute of Technology at Stockholm. And at age 32, he completed the Stockholm Archipelago Raid, a regatta of some 5 days and nights around the beautiful aquatic environment around Stockholm. And if you haven't been to Stockholm, you have one beautiful treat ahead of you. I have, and it is a knockout aquatic environment. After a successful career in traditional companies in Sweden, he drew the entrepreneur's card in 2014 by founding Candela Electric Speedboats, and just a short 2 years later, achieved the dream of foiling above the water in an electric speedboat of his own making. And so to tell us the story of their boats and their company, we welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, Gustav Hasselskog, CEO of Candela. Gustav, welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you, Ron. It's an honor to be with you, and I've read up a bit about the St. Francis Yacht Club and realized it's really one of these old ones you have over there. So it's a great honor to be with you. Also, I'm a big fan of San Francisco. I've been there several times, so it feels good to talk to people in that beautiful town. So I'm gonna talk a bit about foiling boats and especially electric versions of that. I founded this company some 6 years ago and has worked pretty hard on it ever since. It started really in a garage, and now we are a team of 50 people working at Candela. Before we dive into Candela, let me give you some sort of marine background or naval evolution story. So if you don't have a sail, then the best way to go forward is to use a paddle. And this has long been the way of moving yourself through water. And it's super efficient. I mean, you know, this hull type is the most efficient one you can have. It also beats hydrofoil boats. So going slow in displacement mode is still the best thing you can do. But then with the introduction of the combustion engine motor, it was possible to go much faster, and you started to plane instead of going in displacement mode. The only drawback with that approach is that it's very, very inefficient. And I'll spend some time on that during this presentation. But just to give you a hint, this table you see here produces a friction coefficient of roughly 0.25. That's really going uphill compared to a car or a bike or something. It's extremely inefficient. If you compare it to a car, and here the comparison is a 25 feet boat compared to a normal family car, you see that you need 15 times more fuel per kilometer to push that boat through the water. And as you can see on the graph to the right, an airplane is very much more efficient than this 25-foot day cruiser piece. But the car going on wheels is still the best option. The other challenge you run into if you want to make this boat electric is that you don't have very much energy in a battery pack of today. So the best possible batteries you can find, they still are 1/15th in terms of energy density compared to gasoline. So it's hard to make electric cars and make them light. You have to work on the efficiency. But if you want to make a boat electric, then you end up with this equation. So you need 15 times more energy and you have 15 times less energy. So everyone that is good in mathematics is going to figure it out. The more sort of everyday version of this number crunching is that it's a very bad idea to build an electrical boat. So something had to be done. As you might expect, sort of the third step in this naval evolution is really to go foiling. It's a very old technology. I think the earliest records found on hydrofoils is from 1890 already. There was a British engineer. He started to experiment with foils for his airplane. And he found that to test different profiles, the best he could do that without risking his life was to make smaller profiles and test them in water. And then he realized that he got very much lift from water since it has much higher density. And he actually put some foils on some structure, and then he ran in a canal somewhere in UK with a horse, and he got that thing to take off on the water surface. So that was really the first time. And since then, as you probably know, the most famous one dealing with hydrofoils is Alexander Graham Bell. And already in 1919, he built a boat which made more than 60 knots. He borrowed some engines from Rolls-Royce at the time, and he got tremendous speed into that vehicle. I'm happy I was not on board. It was all built in bamboo and then hugely overpowered. But that record, I think it lasted for some 20, 30 years in terms of motorboat speed record. So pretty impressive. Since then, not much has happened really. The Russians did some work on hydrofoils. The Americans did that during the 50s and the 60s. Then it was very much in the sailing where it started to take off. And that was pretty much the time when I started Candela. My personal background is I'm an engineer. If you're an engineer in Sweden and you have pretty good grades when you finalize your master studies, you typically end up in one of these programs to become a manager for one of the big companies in Sweden. And that's what I did. So, which was nice, you know, I got business cards and mobile phone. I went around the world with airplanes and thought that was cool. But after a while, I got pretty bored. So around the age of 45, something like that, I said I need to do something really different now. I was CEO for a chemical company in the Nordics, and I was actually fairly bored. So something had to happen, and I didn't really know what to do. I wanted to do something difficult that was important, and I wanted to get back to engineering that I really lost. I went into administration. To do something really good for the environment was an obvious thing at the time. So to combine something very difficult with doing something good for the world, those were the key driving factors. And I was playing around with my kids at our summer house at the time, and we did a lot of boating, and I started to think about motorboats. And then I realized that the boat we had at the time, which was a Bertrand 25, it consumed awful lot of energy. And just to go the 10-minute ride to a nearby island to buy ice cream, that costed us some $60 back and forth. I think the ice cream for the kids was like $6. So it didn't really add up, and it was very bad for the environment, obviously. So the idea started, what can be done to deal with this? And I fairly soon realized that if you use hydrofoils and if you make the whole design very light, then you can cut out something like 75% of the total energy need compared to a planing boat of the same size. And then I thought, if I put in a Tesla battery, then we would actually get a range that would be sufficient for most people. And as I checked on internet, and typically when you do that, your smart ideas fall apart because you realize that 500 people have already tried it. Or even succeeded with it. But this was really something that nobody was really on, as I could see. And so far we are alone on the market. So it was probably the right thing to bet on. I didn't have any money really to pull this off. So I started the journey to find some initial capital. I contacted more than 90 venture capital companies in Europe. I got 2 meetings and 2 no's. It was a pretty tough start. But eventually, in the beginning of 2015, I had some $100,000 that allowed me to get some people on board and to start the development of the first prototype, which we then put in water by the end of 2016. It didn't really fly at the beginning, so it was a tough period. It took us some 6 months before we got it to fly properly. And I got used to having kind of 10 different engineering problems to deal with every day. It was a good training and getting used to a lot of different challenges. In the beginning of 2017, we finally got it to fly. We had to rebuild both the propulsion and the foil system to make that happen. And that was really a huge day, of course. And then we developed second prototype and we launched the boat to the market in 2018. So 18 months ago, roughly. And since then, we have delivered some more than 20 boats to customers around the world. And now we are a team of close to 50 people. And the main expansion we do right now is actually in R&D. And in production, but R&D is really an area where we push even harder on right now. So the core concept of a Candela boat is that we use hydrofoils, and you can use different types of hydrofoils. We have gone for this solution, which is fully submerged, but also means that the boat gets unstable. So to deal with that, we need a lot of sensors and a lot of computer software to get it stable again. The boat now contains some 90,000 lines of code. So it's really a foiling computer, if you like. The other core concept is to make the boat very light. The boat is made up of carbon, all of it. And below the waterline, we have some 3 millimeters of carbon thickness. And above, it's like 2 millimeters. So that means that the hull shell without the structure is only some 180 pounds in mass. The overall spec of the boat, the current boat at 25 feet roughly, we have made it to a width so that it can be put on a trailer. The foils are fully retractable, so the forward foil can go straight up, and then it sort of enters into a recess that makes it possible to roll it up on a trailer. In the aft, we rotate the entire rudder. That's something that's going on also when we run the boat in the water. But we can raise that whole frame as you see in the aft, and then we get clearance from the water and from the trailer when we put it up there. The boat takes off at roughly 70 knots, where it starts to take off a bit earlier than that. But the lowest foiling speed is 70 knots, and the maximum speed is 30 knots. We could go faster, but we have decided to start at 30 knots for safety reasons. And the range is approximately 50 nautical miles, or say 50 miles. And then you go in some 20 knots. That's the most efficient speed. The most fun thing with the whole Candela concept is that it's so complicated. If you start with the mathematics around the dynamics of the boat, we had to model the whole boat in 6 degrees of freedom, meaning the 3-axis XYZ and all the rotations around that. And to get a proper picture of what's going on, you need not only to know where it is around these 3 axes, you also need to know the velocity and the acceleration around the same axis. So you get a 3x6 matrix that you need to update with a high frequency. We run the code at some 90 to 100 hertz. So every hundredth of a second, we update all these variables based on the sensor data we get in. We make estimates and try to make a good judgment of what's the value of each of these variables. That allows us to not only control the boat here now, but also to make a prediction into the future. Since when you have all those variables, it's possible to say what is a likely position of the boat in the future, and that allows us to make a much better control of the boat. I think one of the advantages with that it is fairly difficult is that it also keeps the competition at some distance. I've been surprised that we so far haven't seen very much competition at all. There are some teams that are still in prototype stage, but no one has really entered the market so far. It's probably not only because of this, but also that it's a fairly complex product in general. You need to get into sensor technology, to lightweight design, into all the control mathematics. But you also need all the mechanics that we have on board. Just to design a transmission proved to be fairly difficult. I think I have some pictures on that here. So one of the toughest challenges we had was actually the lower housing you see on the lower right side of this picture. We're using a traditional bevel gear. I thought, that technology has been around since 1800 something. I thought it was easy, but I learned it was not easy. It needs to be super compact, so the gears needs to be very small and take then very high loads to get to the size we want. So I think we've been able to design the most efficient lower housing of this power size in the world. We actually rented a large data center at the University of Valencia to run all the CFD simulations for this. And then we can optimize the shape as much as possible. So we ended up with this thing. It's 82 millimeters in diameter. In inches, that would be something a bit more than 3 inches, I guess. Yeah, and that, as mentioned, proved to be a big challenge for us. So we had quite a few collapsed gear houses before we got it right. Some other pictures here show up to the left, we see one of the PCBAs that we design ourselves. So we do all the electronics from scratch. So the flight controller we built from components. Also the other main computer we have on board is what we call the user interface computer that is used not only to drive the navigation system and everything that the user sees on the screen, but also all the data logging. We log some 280 variables at 100 Hertz. So we create an awful lot of data that we then send out in the cloud. So that's all managed by the second computer on board. And then we have a lot of electronics dealing with the different actuators and sensors on board, and we have designed that from scratch as well. All of this have allowed us to make sort of a fully integrated boat. So we communicate with one communication protocol throughout the boat, and in a bus structure, which makes it very modular, and we can easily do changes and so on. It also means that we have control over everything. We're not dependent on other suppliers to, whenever they go bankrupt or make changes in their code or not make changes in the code that we would like to see, we can avoid all those dependencies. So that's really a massive advantage and creates a lot of freedom in the development process. To the left, you see some of the simulations we've done on structure for the hull itself. So we do quite a lot of these CFD studies and FEM studies to ensure that we have a very efficient boat, and also to make it as strong as it needs to be. It's all designed to withstand some 4 Gs in force from the wing, and it's designed to also withstand falling down from 2 meters into a wave in 35 knots. So that's basically the use. The sort of the crash scenarios we have used to design the boat. In the middle, you see an example of the screen that you have on your smartphone if you have a Candela. So all the users are connected to their boats and can see state of charge, and they can also change like the charging current and do some other things on the app, check the latest trip and so on. The connection to all the boats around the world means also that whenever there's an issue with the boat, we can see what's going on. So if somebody hits a rock, hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. then we can detect that in all the sensors on board, and we can see really what has happened. And it can also be something doesn't really work, and then we can just make an update of some changed parameters or something, and then the boat can get going again. We do monthly releases of software, and that is done over the cloud as well. To the upper side there, upper right, you see the navigation system that we then designed from scratch. I'll mention a bit about self-driving later on in this presentation, but the first steps we have kind of implemented already in a very simple fashion. So if you click somewhere on the screen, you will get the fastest route calculated for you. So that will show up as a line on the screen, and you just have to sort of follow that with the steering wheel, and then you should avoid hitting rocks and then get safely to your destination. The core of this is really the energy efficiency, and that's what we have made a lot of efforts to optimize against. We have done, in this chart, you see some comparisons of 3 other suppliers of electrical boats. And as you can see, we are now in the neighborhood of 80% in energy reduction. So it's really drastic numbers. And to mention some of these numbers, if you're running 20 knots, the boat runs at 16 kilowatts. So that corresponds to roughly 20 horsepower. And it's a 25 feet day cruiser. The Bertram I had back in the days, it was also 25 feet, a bit wider though, but there I think I run at something like 120 horsepower for the same speed. So and now we're talking 20. So it's really a dramatic reduction that can be achieved with a combination of foils and a lightweight design. The energy topic is one. The other one is that you get a boat that behaves very much better in big waves. And the reason is simply that the hull doesn't slam into the waves. Instead, you have the foil underneath the water and the hull above the water. And then we can, in the control system, decide how much we should follow the waves and how much we should filter them out. So that means a massive reduction in slamming. I mean, the boat really doesn't slam at all. It's a very soft ride and very gentle ride. We also generate basically no wakes. I think we are less than 5 centimeters, so 2 inches in wake height behind the boat. And in a setting like Stockholm, the Stockholm archipelago, wakes can really be a headache, and you create a lot of mess for other boaters. And if you have a big boat, the smaller boats it can even get dangerous for them to run in your wake. So, and as you know, the erosion of the shorelines is very much driven by big wakes from boats. And then with the ability to fully control the boat in turns, we can make it very fun to run. So the steering is now electronic, which means that when you turn, you kind of kick down the boat in the turn. So it's hard to describe that feeling, but it's a bit more than sort of a bit like a fighter jet type of feeling, is in that the boat is extremely responsive to any changes you do in the steering wheel. This technology can be used for boats up to some 50, 60 meters. So in feet, that would be, say, 150 feet. And beyond that, it would make more sense to run with a displacement or semi-displacement hull to get the best efficiency. So, but it really fills the whole area for boats that are today planing. Whereas, you know, a big tanker, 200, 300 meters long, is still better off in a displacement mode than going foiling. It would not make any sense. So, but this sort of size discussion leads us a bit into the next topic I want to share a bit about. So the ambition with Candela is that we're going to develop technologies for foiling, for, as I mentioned, sort of the fully integrated vehicle, the cloud connections, and also propulsion. We're doing a lot of efforts there right now. And then we are moving more and more into self-driving. So when we do that, the vision then is that we should be able to create passenger vehicles for public transportation that at the end can run autonomously, which then would open up also for shifting from a timetable-driven public transportation to more of an on-demand service. So in a setting like Stockholm Archipelago or the Bay of San Francisco, you can imagine some 100 boats maybe, and then you have a central computer that optimizes the route based on the demand presently. So each customer would then have an app, and they order the boat, and then the central computer sort of dispatches the boats and give them different routes. We believe that when it comes to the autonomous driving, that can be much easier achieved in a boat than in a car. And the main reason for that is speed. You can program the boat so that it always has the possibility to go down and brake fully. That's not possible with the car, obviously. If you go on a highway, something happens, you don't have that option. So that puts lesser demands on a boat system for self-driving than it does for a car. This is just one initial rendering that we've done we are now in fairly advanced discussions with the municipality of Stockholm to make a first test boat to run public transportation here in Stockholm. One of the key advantages that they see with such a solution is that we can run faster than they do today, because a lot of the parts of the routes that they run on, they are limited in speed because they make so much wakes. But if we can take away the wake, which we basically do, that would open up for going at much higher speed. So then we can get very competitive also against cars. If we can run, say, 35 knots, that's hard to beat with the traffic congestion that we have in a city like Stockholm, and I would guess you have that fair share of that in San Francisco as well. So then in Stockholm, for some of the routes, we will be able to run at half the time compared to taking the car or taking a bus or a train. So that's super exciting. Yeah, and these boats will initially then be what we call semi-autonomous, meaning there will be a control center where you have staff that have the proper nautical competence to drive these boats, but they would then drive them remotely or take responsibility for them remotely. So with that setup, we can gradually increase the degree of automation from being just sort of advisory in the beginning to fully automated some years ahead. So I think that's kind of a nice way to bridge this and also to build trust around the whole autonomy topic, which is obviously something that can be pretty scary. That was my presentation.
Wonderful, fascinating, Gustav, very much so. So let's see, a couple of different trains of question. First of all, what's the total addressable market in your view for your technology? I guess you could break it into two pieces, recreational and commercial.
Yeah, so, well, if you look on the total recreational boat market, I think it's estimated to around $25 billion US. Roughly 80% of that is power boats, and 20 is sailing boats. So then we have 80 left. And then you have roughly 80% of the market is also in US and Europe combined. So that's really sort of the target. So there we have, say, some 64% of the total market if you go for that. It has been hard to estimate the commercial market. We believe it's much larger. We have done different estimates indicating that it's larger, but it's all hard to capture that. And the reason is basically that it's kind of a new territory. We get into something in between passenger ferries and taxi business. And in some areas, like in Asia, the taxi business can be fairly large if you look like in Thailand, for example. Whereas in a setting like Stockholm, and I would guess in San Francisco, it's a very sort of undeveloped market. People don't go by a taxi boat really. It's really a niche market. So, but we would address both of them. So I would guess it's much larger. So if I would just speculate, we're talking probably something in the neighborhood of 100 billion or something.
Got it. So what's the target? So staying on the recreational market for a minute, define the target audience of potential buyers. Who do you think is the likely buyer? Give me some kind of a profile of your target audience.
Yeah, I mean, now the technology is new, the product is new. It has a fairly high price tag compared to normal boats of this size. So
what does it cost? Give us the cost, the price.
So it's like 300,000 euros. The novelty of the technology combined with the price that we have currently sets the stage a bit for the target group. So what we see, it's mainly entrepreneurs that have made some money by themselves. They are typically tech enthusiasts in general. They tend to have a crush on Elon Musk, and they have at least one Tesla. They're all male, and they're all above 35 years old. So they roughly have the target group.
How many boats have you made and sold so far?
So we have shipped, I think it's 19 or 20 now. I think we have sold some 30 boats at this stage.
Give us a little bit about the funding history and only what you're willing to make public, but what's your expectation about future funding requirements?
Yeah, so initially it was fairly hard to get funding. The venture capital community was really not into boating. Although I tried to position this as something new, it was hard to make that story convincing. Now the story has changed quite a lot. The last round we made, we got a lot of interest. We made it in the midst of Corona, but despite that, we got basically double the money compared to what we asked for initially, and we did that at a decent valuation. So the last round was in dollars, it would be roughly $10 million that we had as the last funding run. We are now in a scale-up phase. Yeah, maybe that puts some letter on it.
What percent of your total overhead is R&D?
Well, of the total overhead, it's more than half. So yeah, it's fairly dominant, and that's where we expand the most now. Also there, I mean, pretty much like when it comes to fundraising, the picture has changed a lot. It was initially not too easy to recruit people. Now it's very easy. So we get a lot of inbounds and a lot of interest to work for Candela because we have so much exciting technology that we deal with. Everything now from structural engineering, hydrodynamics, dynamic modeling, control system theory, and now we're moving into more and more into AI for the self-driving. So and it's still a fairly small team, and we are moving very fast ahead, and we are, in our sort of tiny industry, we are fair to say, I think, ahead of the rest. So that obviously creates a certain feeling as well that we are not doing something 10 years behind the rest. So
those of us in the Bay Area recognize that it's called the Bay Area because all the businesses and homes are peripheral to the bay itself. And what's been before now kind of a unfeasible idea of having ferry traffic from Silicon Valley up to San Francisco, which would be much faster than auto traffic, it would be feasible if you can reduce the wave effect of this boat and increase the speed. So essentially, one of the benefits of your Candela that I've seen in person sail in San Francisco Bay, a buddy of mine bought one, and it was great. I saw real low sound and of course minimal wake, really, really small wake. And it's possible, I could imagine ferry traffic all across the bay, so the bay becomes a more efficient highway to transport people from Silicon Valley to San Francisco, or Vallejo to San Francisco, or even the California Delta, where you have to be really attentive. You have to pay a lot of attention to the wake your boat creates up in the California Delta. It's going to develop the ecosystem. So when one looks at the commercial viability of ferry traffic, one looks at places like the archipelago in Stockholm and Hong Kong and other metro areas, where you basically have to cross a short distance of water rather than peripherally going around that water to get someplace on a car, bus, train. So you earlier mentioned that you thought that the commercial market would be several X the recreational market. And I recognize that and have looked and seen that there are several big electric ferry makers right now, but they don't share, they're not into the foiling and the computerized flight control systems that you have and have basically pioneered. So a few questions about that commercial market. How much of your energy is now being spent on the potential of your commercial market versus the recreational market, which is in front of you now?
Well, the way we see it is that we develop technology mainly, and then we put that technology into different boats. So our core focus is really to continue to develop technology in some certain areas like propulsion, full technology, self-driving, cloud connection, integrated vehicle, and so on. At the end, we should be able to sell that technology to other shipbuilders. So the technology development as such is kind of generic. Now, we obviously need to prove that this can be put into a ferry or a larger boat as well. So that's what we're working on right now to launch such a boat. And we do that in cooperation with the region of Stockholm, which is of course good because then we can run the boat in sort of a proper setting and with real passengers and so on. It's just not a prototype.
So give us milestones ahead. Let's say engineering-wise, give us kind of a couple milestones. I don't want a detailed roadmap, but basically, what do you look for in terms of engineering milestones?
Yeah. So when it comes to the whole self-driving, by this summer we should be able to drive the boat, or it should be able to drive by itself, and do that with some competence. And by that. We should be able to do it in sort of decent weather, so excluding rain and storm and full darkness. And probably a year after that, we should be able to do it in tougher weather conditions as well. I would guess around roughly a year from now, we're going to see the first larger boat getting into water. Roughly, that would be the time scale.
Larger being what size?
By roughly the size of the renderings you saw. So we would start off with a 25 passenger ferry, it could be a good size for that type of setup. If you're going to run it in the San Francisco Bay, you don't want to have it too small. You have pretty tough conditions there with underwater currents and some wind and so on. So the boat can't be too tiny for that reason. On the other hand, if you do it at the end in a fully autonomous on-demand service, there is no real advantage with having too large a boat, because then you would just actually reduce your service level. So the best service level would be to have small boats and a lot of them.
Now you mentioned that that's your chip. That board we saw was your own chip. Why did you decide not to OEM with a big legacy chip maker who's got the potential to get your price down or even your functionality up?
Oh, you mean to build the PCBAs and computers by
Yeah,
ourselves?
yeah, the circuit boards and the chips essentially.
Yeah. Well, we don't do the ships ourselves. We're not, yeah. I would love that,
Yeah,
but
yeah, right,
we
right.
stop short of that. Well, no, I mean it's a very dedicated microcontroller at the end for the foil control, and we need the right speed, and for that we need all these sensors. Some of them sit on board, and so on. So we couldn't really find anybody out there that was having that. And also, as I said, I mean we need full flexibility here in future development. And if we're going to start to ship this to other manufacturers, we need to own the entire technology, and we cannot be sort of in the hands of someone else.
So, you know, San Francisco being the sort of land of entrepreneurs since the gold rush in 1850 to now, we're filled with people who founded companies. Give us a little bit of a sense about your schedule. Give me your like weekly schedule. If you were to open up your calendar, you'd say, okay, I've got an engineering meeting, I've got a whatever meeting, and how deep into the CFD do you get? How deep into the weeds do you get? So, as a founder, what's your week look like?
Well, I'm actually pretty nerdy. I love all the engineering details. I was lucky enough to just hire a deputy CEO, which means that some of the stuff that I find pretty boring, like finance and facility and internal IT and corporate governance, all of that is sort of taken away from me now. So I can spend even more time on R&D. I spent quite a lot of time reading into subjects. So studying scientific articles basically into different subjects to really find the most recent thinking in different areas. And that could be everything from self-driving to electric motors that we are into now. And obviously all the different phenomena within hydrodynamics that can be very complex. And that's something I find a lot of joy in as well, to learn about all these subjects and really dive into them. So that's a fair share of my day to read into the different engineering areas that we're into. And then I spend quite a lot of time with the engineers to sort of make sure that we get things moving. At the end, there is a lot of optimization between different engineering areas that you need to do, and that's really my job to take care of that. You can always make something strong enough so that one engineer gets happy, but then you may jeopardize the hydrodynamic efficiency or the mass of the boat or something like that. So yeah. And then, I mean, I take care of all the general tasks like the external aspects of running a company, like doing this presentation, meeting with the investors, meeting with some major customers and all of that. And then leading the overall company, of course. But I have the luck to have a fairly strong focus on R&D.
So on that subject, so in terms of the propulsion, the propeller, and the underwater gearbox, have you made all the gears inside of that yourself, or are you subbing out to subcontractors the different machine pieces that you're using inside that complex little gearbox?
Yeah, we have done the design ourselves, including even the sort of the design of the gears and sort of the curvature of the teeth and everything. Mm-hmm. And with the target to really minimize the size of the whole thing, so to push up the loadings of the gears as much as possible without breaking them. But then we do we have subcontracted all the manufacturing of metal parts so that we don't do in-house. We do quite a lot of carbon manufacturing in-house, so we build the hull and the deck. And also all the foils and struts and rudders we do in-house, because we want to make sure we get really the best possible quality on these. So that's important to control. It's also for structural reasons. I mean, we really need to know that all the foils are manufactured in a way so that it can withstand all the loads that they need to withstand. take the main wing, it's 1 inch thick only, and if you put 4 Gs, then you have a bit more than 6 tons of load on that thing, and yeah, it's 1 inch long and thick, and it's 100 inches wide. So it's just to understand that you need to be on top of the manufacturing of that thing. We have only 1 wing in the front, but we twist the entire wing, so it becomes like a screw. From a material science perspective, that's obviously very challenging, because then you want something that is very easy to twist.
Yes.
At the same time, you should be able to take massive bending loads on it. Yeah, we broke some falls before we got that right.
So what are the gating influences to speed in a recreational speedboat?
It's like a car. I mean, if you drive it too fast in the street and you crash, it's hard to go to the manufacturer and claim anything. But in our case, since the technology is new, we need to put the safety standards much higher than others. There could also be a perception, since it is so, everything is automated from takeoff and landing, and how it banks and turns and all of that, that you get the perception as a driver that everything is safe here. I can do whatever I like. And it would take a lot of time for us to test all these weird scenarios that we could think of if we would run in 50 knots. So we will gradually increase that. It's not a big push from the customers so far to do that. So it's not really a big priority right now, but at the end of the day, that's something we're gonna address, yes.
So those of us who've been looking at foiling for the last decade or so recognize that, especially as you're going slower, it's kind of like a water ski. Your angle is very steep, and as the boat gets going faster, it flattens out. What's the different angular shift from takeoff to going 30 knots on the forward foil?
Yeah, so the forward foil can have a maximum angle of attack of 12 degrees. And then it can have the minimum angle of attack is -5 degrees. So that's the sort of the envelope. We can change the angle of attack with roughly 20 degrees per second. So the foil can move very fast. And that's something you need if you go in big waves. A wave is not only sort of a surface that is moving, you also have circling water particles underneath the surface. And that circulating movement changes obviously the lift in the wing. I mean, you get kind of an upwash first, and then you get a downwash, so that changes the angle of attack. And you also get varying apparent speed of the water hitting the foil. So that means we need to continuously change the angle of attack in sort of a level flight in big waves. It's moving with very fast movements in order to create basically zero G-forces for the passengers.
So given that one of the fears you might have of going fast with a recreational boat is that the pilot, a Joe boat buyer, might not be really skilled, that wouldn't be the case necessarily with commercial applications. So are you visualizing that bigger ferries that would be run by professional pilots could have much higher speeds? Because once you're out of the water, foiling several feet above the water is not only a smoother ride for big ferries, but it becomes safer with you have more potential safety precautions built into the mechanism.
Absolutely, yeah. So that would be easy, and then you can really you can beef up the speed quite a lot, and you get some efficiency issues if you start to hit about sort of 45-50 knots, somewhere like that. It's hard to make decent foils at that speed. Then you enter the territory of supercavitating foils, and those are not very efficient. It can be done. On the other hand, if you look into if you talk sort of public transportation, we will probably have fairly short distances that we run. And if you can get some kind of automated charging, like induction charging or something like that at the harbors, then we should be able to use a lot of energy and maybe not focus too much on efficiency, which would allow us to go fast.
How long does it take to charge up the recreational boat, your Candela 7 now?
So you can, if you have sort of the fastest charging option we have today, which is all based on onboard chargers, you can charge it in 4 hours. So then you run, in a European setting, that would be 3 times 16 amps at 230 volts. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you're using your own charts. You mean your own navigational charts? Did I understand you to say that when you have the mobile app with the Candela 7, one of the other features you have is you have your own navigational charts?
The commercial navigation systems that you have, those are very complex and difficult to use. And I never find the buttons I'm looking for in those endless menus. Maybe I'm stupid, but I thought, this must be much easier. So we did something very easy to use. That was the target. And we also went for, which seems to be new in the market, we went for a multi-touch screen, so you can sort of pan and zoom in the way that users are used to nowadays. And still, most of the navigation systems, you push hard, very hard, but with one finger. And that's all you can do, which is kind of limiting.
You made your own graphical user interface, your own GUI that you put on top of existing charts that you, okay,
Yeah.
Got it. How are you using the community social media aspects to inform users and new users?
Well, I mean, we do some PR obviously through social media. I think the what's interesting is the way we communicate with the customers is that we have a chat functionality. So each customer has sort of their own chat line directly into our support function. So if they have a problem, the battery may have discharged because they haven't used it for a while, whatever it is. They just use that chat and we respond through that. And then we can also, as I mentioned, we can review the logs to see what has happened to the boat and give them sort of a professional response, and we can see what problems they have. And if they have problems with our super easy navigation system, we can still guide them through that because we can see where on the screen they touch. So if you're in San Francisco, you don't really know what buttons to put on to press. We can tell, okay, now you pressed the wrong button because we're following what's going on in the boat.
Sharing your worry is also, it's an informative exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but I think my sort of guiding principle since I started Candela has been a bit around, based on a worry about, I don't know if that's a term you use in English, but the bearded lady. In Sweden, back in the days, we had sort of traveling circuses. They went from sort of village to village. And the good ones, they had a bearded lady with them. And the bearded lady was someone that people loved to watch, but nobody liked to marry her at the end. And if foiling technology is perceived kind of a bit weird, but interesting, then you can create a lot of media buzz and interest and people want to test ride and so on, but no one wants to marry at the end. And for us to obviously run a business, that's not a sustainable model. So therefore it's been important to design a boat that really looks like a boat. We have avoided any kind of spaceship type of design language and maybe gone even too far into sort of a bit retro type design. And that was a bit driven by this worry that I mentioned that the technology can be perceived to be a bit weird and then it can never take off. Now I think I'm less worried about that. So we are selling boats and it seems to work.
Yeah, it does look like the 50s Chevrolet kind of like look. Candela has a familiar sense that way. So it's not Jetsons, it's not the futuristic kind of worrisome thing. I can see you wanting to be a little bit more comfortable. So from where do you expect competition first?
I think it would be another startup. I think if you look at the boating industry, it's kind of a catalog industry in a sense that anybody can start a boating company. You just make a hull and a deck, and then you have catalogs for the rest. I mean, you can buy a motor somewhere. You can buy the interiors, there are catalogs for that, for the cleats and hatches and whatnot. So it's super easy to kick off a boating company. That also means that the big established boat companies, they are not very sophisticated when it comes to R&D. The sophistication is kind of further down in the value chain. So I don't think that they will pull this off really. Maybe it's also too risky for them to sort of to compete with themselves and venture into new technology. So yeah, it would be some other startup, I think. I think when we start to talk about public transportation, we see a very different appetite from investors that we haven't really seen in the pleasure boat market. So probably that's going to be the twist of our next competitor. That would be my guess.
What do you mean the twist? What do you mean by the twist?
That they focus directly on public transportation and go for that whole concept.
The commercial, commercial application.
Exactly. Yeah.
In that case, you'd want to be ahead enough so that you could begin to license it to potential competitors. So you have a co-opetition model. So you can license to the fast followers and stay ahead in the recreational market, which would be your R&D side.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see that development that, I mean, if you look on the car industry, for example, you see that there are very few car manufacturers in the world compared to the size of that market. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that it's very difficult to get a combustion engine to work properly and all the gears and all of that. I mean, it's serious engineering and you need scale and a lot of resources to make that work. That's drastically changing now when the electrical cars enter the market. It's super easy to build an electrical car, really. So you're going to see a lot of competitors coming in there. I think the boating industry has always been a bit like the car market, that it's like the electrical car market. So it has always been easy, like basically no entry barriers. But down in the value chain, you've seen a bit more margins, a bit less competition, a bit more entry barriers. And there, I think with the combination of hydrofoil technology, autonomous driving, and also we're working on some pretty serious patents now on propulsion technology. There, I think that it's going to be a nice business to be in.
What do you think? What's the most complex piece of the mechanism? Is it the flight controlling computer algorithms? Is it the computational fluid dynamics of the foils and the foiling system? Which do you think is the most difficult for a competitor to chase after you in? Where do you think your best advantage is?
Yeah, no, I think it's all the scenarios that you're going to encounter in the control system to make it work flawless for any type of customer who is untrained, and that requires a lot of time and a lot of thinking and a lot of changes and so on. So you need certain maturity there, and that takes time at the end. And that's obviously a combination with both with the mechanics. So it's not only software based on a control system theory, it's also the mechanics as well as the hydrodynamics and make that to sort of a working unit.
So let's see how a yachtsman handles Candela technology on the water.
We're aboard the Candela Seven in San Francisco Yacht Club, the oldest yacht club on the Pacific coast, in fact, with Trig Liljestrand, starboat sailor and the owner of J90 No. 1, owned by Rod Johnstone himself, the designer. And Trig has bought the first Candela 7 on the West Coast. Very quiet ride on the boat as we're motoring out. Very, very quiet. Take off here, yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now.
So we're zooming around in Belvedere Cove now. So we just came off the foil just now. We went from going 27 knots down to 3 knots. So now at this moment we're in a driving mode with both of the forward foil arms up, and so the engine is up and we're tooling around as if we're just in a regular speedboat right now.
Gustav, top 3 reactions to my exciting ride on the Candela. Quiet, wake-free, and green. I was most impressed with your flight control technology. Your ability to make micro adjustments to pitch and roll 100 times a second was masterful. And so on behalf of the St. Francis Yacht Club, we'd like to say thank you for sharing your pioneering green technology with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you, Ron. It was a pleasure to be with you, and a great honor to speak to this audience.
Thank you for joining the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, where we ask that you always stay curious.